Thanks for the invitation.
At the beginning of this year, you wrote this book, 12 Rules for Life, an Antidote to Chaos. And in the 6 or 7 months since, around the world, it's sold pretty much 2 million copies.
Yeah, it's
pretty
coming
extraordinary.
up on that.
You
Yes.
have struck some sort of a chord. Why do you think that is?
Because I'm having a serious conversation with my viewers and listeners and readers about how to structure their lives individually and the relationship between responsibility and meaning. And it's a level of discourse, I would say, or a level of analysis that people don't often have an opportunity to participate in or to hear. It's filling a need in our culture, apparently.
A search for meaning, is it also appealing, reaching out to people, and in particular men, it seems, from all the surveys, men who are angry and who feel lost and alienated?
Well, I don't think it's reaching out to them because they're angry. I think that it's reaching out to people who are alienated, certainly. There's lots of people who are alienated. I think that it's partly focused to some degree on young men because my YouTube channel is very popular and most of the people who watch YouTube happen to be young men. So that's skewed the listening audience in terms of that demographic. It isn't obvious that it's only young men that are buying the book. That's much more mixed.
Yeah, there are many books out there, and over the years many published, which talk about a meaningful life and how to live it, and you call yours Rules for Life. I mean, you could perhaps characterize it as a form of self-help, but there are very few of those sorts of books that go into great detail about the dangers of Marxism, talk about the history of Mao's China, Stalin's Soviet Union. There's a real political content to your book, and I wonder why you are so preoccupied with reminding your individuals who you say are searching for meaning, reminding them so repeatedly, so often, about the dangers of totalitarian communism.
Well, I'm not. I mean, there's only a section in one of the chapters that actually deals with that, although there are motifs that run through it, but it's more a matter of being concerned about collectivist ideologies in general and the danger of ideological thought as a means of guiding yourself through life. So, I mean, one of the failures that characterized the communist totalitarian states, and equally on the fascist side, was the failure of individual character. Because, for example, in the Soviet Union, equally in places like Mao's China, people were called upon to falsify their own experience, to lie in the service of the state, to not say things they needed to say, and to not stand up when they should have stood up.
I'm just wondering whether it's your analysis that if you look around the world today, but particularly the Western world, which you focus most of your attention upon, you see a real danger of some sort of renewal of a neo-Marxist...
I think that that's a vision of my followers, and I don't think of them as followers, I think of them as viewers and readers and listeners. I know perfectly well. I've talked to 150,000 people in the last 3 months at 55 live events. I understand my audience, and I know perfectly well that the vast majority of them are there because they were rather disoriented in life for various reasons and have decided to develop a personal vision and to take more responsibility and to try to tell the truth as best they can, and that's actually helping them a lot. That's what's happening. The thing is that...
But would you recognize there's an overlap between the sorts of people who can deeply sympathize and find a resonance in your message, and many of those who have turned to Donald Trump in the United States right now? I mean,
well, there's some overlap because there's like 30 million people watching my videos, so there's overlap across the entire political spectrum. But the thing is that in the discussions that I've had with people, let's say in the mainstream media, about the response to me, there's a chronic and constant attempt to make it political. It's not political. What I'm doing is not political. It's psychological. And so, like, I talk to at least...
Of course, but you can't control the way in which your words and your messages are perceived and used by others.
But I also know perfectly
well...
well...
I'd be kind of interested to know whether you're worried about it.
Well, of course I'm worried about it, but I also know that I've received hundreds of letters from people who've indicated quite clearly that they were attracted by the blandishments of the alt-right, let's say, and that they've been led back to the political center as a consequence of listening to what I've been telling them.
Would it be fair to say that one of the core messages of your book is that we underestimate the power and the relevance and the importance of old stories and myths, including the Christian Bible, but also including a host of other stories, which you say have survived the test of time and tell us truths about ourselves, which many people today, and you, I think, would then say many people in academia today who are into sort of constructivism and relativism, are missing the truth of old verities. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would say that's definitely a theme that runs through the book, is that there's wisdom in traditional stories that we need to understand, not merely believe, but also to understand. And so, for example, last year I did a series of 15 lectures on Genesis, right? And most of that audience was young men, and that's been viewed by millions of people online now.
And the Bible in particular, I mean, you say the Bible, for better or worse, is the foundational document of Western civilization. It is its careful, respectful study can reveal things to us about ourselves and what we believe and how we should act, more than can be discovered in almost any other matter.
Yes,
the
that's
Bible's
right.
central, it seems, to your belief
It's certainly
system.
central. It's central to Western culture. It's the foundational document of Western culture. I mean,
And this word truth, which is quite an important word for you, you think the Bible contains irrefutable truth.
well, I don't know what irrefutable means necessarily, but it certainly contains a form of truth. I mean, it's a narrative form of truth. It's the same form of truth that you see presented in front of you when you go see movies, for example, or when you read great literature.
Well, movies
that.
are fiction. I mean,
Yeah, but look, we wouldn't be able to rank order fiction in terms of its quality if it didn't bear some relationship to truth.
But I suppose, as you know, this show is aired right around the world, has millions of viewers who, of course, are not from a Christian tradition at all, not from any Western tradition. They may be Hindus, they may be Muslims, they may be animists. But how can they, therefore, relate to your 12 rules for life when they are so wedded to the culture and the traditions and the truths, as you would put it, of the Bible?
Well, I also draw on other traditions and extensively throughout the book and also in my first book, but the attitude that I'm taking towards the stories that our culture is predicated on is one that people from all over the world find engaging. So it's because these stories are deep enough and significant enough so that there's plenty of room at the table for everyone to have an intelligent discussion about them. And I'm not necessarily saying stories and the fundamental traditions that are in them and the Enlightenment doctrines upon which countries like England, for example, are founded. So, and I'm a scientist with many published works, and so I'm perfectly aware of, despite the criticisms of that particular philosopher, perfectly aware of the utility of a scientific and enlightened approach. But to think that humanistic values, let's say secular values, have flourished for a long time, and then to call that 200 years only means that philosopher and I have very different ideas about what a long time is.
Well, yeah,
I'm an evolutionary biologist, by the way, not a political philosopher, and
well,
so my time scale is thousands of years, not hundreds of years.
Yeah, your time scale is thousands of years, but I wonder how you then conceptualize the importance of change. You know, a lot of your work is about constancy and finding truths in the very deep past. But what about the importance of change? I mean, if one thinks about everything from the emancipation of women, equality for women, think about gay rights, think about civil rights. These are changes that we've seen in our societies in the last 50 years, and many people think that your philosophy actually has no real place for change at all.
Well,
it runs counter to change.
All that means is that they actually haven't read it, because one of the things that I point out very clearly in the book is that you have an internal guide to meaning. It's an instinct. It's a manifestation of something called the orienting reflex, which is a very deep instinct. And what it does is try to place you on the border between stasis and transformation, which is where you need to be, because in order to survive properly, you have to maintain your structure, but you have to update it in the face of constant challenge.
For people watching this, let's ask a basic question. If I were living in the late 19th century in the UK, as a man, I may well have persuaded myself that the natural order of things is for men to have the vote and women not to. If you were living at that time with your regard for tradition and long-term eternal truths, you might well side with those who oppose the emancipation of women.
Well, assuming that my primary emphasis is on the maintenance of tradition, but like I said, it's not. My primary emphasis is on the ability for people to live in a context that's defined by active meaning. And so, for example, to the degree that we're engaging in a discussion here that is actually going to be meaningful to both of us and to the people who are watching it. What that will actually signify is that we've done a proper job of staying within a tradition that's sufficiently general so that we can all understand it, and sufficiently updating it at the same time.
But to stick with equality for women then, and to stick with specifics, why do you argue that society today has been overly and dangerously feminized?
Well, because I see a backlash against masculinity, and a sense that there's something toxic about masculinity.
What is this idea of being
such.
over? Why is society overly feminized?
Well, I didn't ever say that society was overly feminized. So if we're going to discuss my views, we should use my actual words. I believe that there's a danger in our society at the moment of making the assumption that our culture, for example, is a tyrannical patriarchy, which it is in some small part, and that any active engagement on the part of young men in particular is indistinguishable from an unacceptable power and dominance drive, which I don't believe.
But surely
all of that is inappropriate and incorrect.
If much of the power and authority over a very long historical period has lain with men, isn't it only inevitable that some men will get a little hacked off when women are given a stab at something approaching equality?
Well, that could be inevitable, but that doesn't make it right, and it's certainly not something that I support. So
So you think men's resentment is more important than women's effort to attain equality?
I'm not in favor of resentment at all. I think that if you're resentful, something's definitely wrong. Either you need to grow the hell up and take stock of your life, or you have some things to say to people that you haven't been saying.
You say science undoubtedly shows us that men and women have different traits, and there's a lot of science to back you up on that. But you say that because of that, men are hardwired to achieve success and to be successful in a way that women are not.
No, not at all. I've never said anything like that. I've said that there are biological differences between men and women that express themselves in temperament and in occupational choice, and that